Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. Another January is in the books, and this year in particular, people got sober curious. Some surveys estimated that 1 in 3 Americans either cut out drinking or cut down. You can't see me because it's a podcast, but my hand is raised. I'm among the millions who used this month to try out drinking less, and it's been a good experience for me. I'm in the studio with Say More producer Anna Kusmer. Hi, Anna.
Hello.
Well, you haven't been drinking, and it's for another reason. You're pregnant.
Yeah, guilty as charged. I do miss wine, but it's been a dry couple months for me. Let's put it that way.
Wait, was that a Freudian slip?
No, I mean, I would love to drink. I would love to be more European and stuff, but I don't have it in me.
We've been talking about doing this episode for a while now, whatever you want to call it. Dry, damp, high January.
High January, is that like smoking weed instead of drinking?
That's right. I mean, I haven't heard that term until this year.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So did you partake in dry or damp January?
Yes, because I felt like I drank a lot, around the holidays. And, I didn't go dry. I just drank a lot less.
I mean, something I've been hearing about a lot is, you said it's sober curious. There seems to be a greater interest in the in-between. People are not necessarily stopping drinking completely, but they're being more conscientious about alcohol consumption, drinking less. And of course, new medical research is out that's saying that drinking might be worse for us than we thought. So there seem to be a lot of reasons to drink less alcohol.
Yes, and later in this episode, I talked to a physician who specializes in alcohol use and other substances, and he told me a lot more about that.
Before we go to the hospital to talk to the doctor, Shirley, you and I actually did some hard-hitting field reporting for this story, didn't we?
Hi, I'm Shirley.
Hey, Pat. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming.
So we went to Dre. It's this non-alcoholic bottle shop in the South End in Boston, and we met up with the owner, Pat Dooling.
We first opened in this location in the South End in November 23, so a little over a year, and then we recently opened our second store in Cambridge, Central Square. Yeah. This is big business now. This is an incredible growing market.
If you enter Dre, it might actually take you a while to realize that it isn't a regular high-end liquor store.
People often come in and get fooled. They're like, is everything non-alcoholic? We've had people spend a very long time.
So they've got this beer section, and they've got a wine section, they've got this spirit section, and pre-mixed mocktails.
That's your favorite, right? The pre-mixed mocktails?
Yes, it is. And so I asked why Pat opened the store, and it was a real personal reason why he did so.
Yeah, I always like to say I had a very successful drinking career, so successful I had to stop. And so it's better for everyone around me that I don't. I sort of, again, I felt like I had to make the choice to stop completely. And it was harming my mind, my body, my relationships, my business prospects. There was nothing good about it for me.
But Pat, he had this business background. I think he came from private equity. And so he looked at the market. He realized that the non-alcoholic adult beverage market, it's growing. And so he wanted in.
Growth. It's small, very small base. But if you looked at it, this is a market that's growing 20 to 30% a year every single year the past 4 or 5 years. That's pretty exceptional in a consumer good, right, which are normally not high growth markets. But I think
so. This actually really resonates with me because I've just anecdotally noticed a lot more non-alcoholic offerings almost everywhere I go. There'll be crates of non-alcoholic beer at weddings. Restaurants will have really good non-alcoholic drink sections.
Pat was telling us there was growing acceptance of this non-alcoholic culture. But at the same time, people still don't get it.
People will come in and be like, why would anyone drink any of this? This is the dumbest thing ever. We'll say basically that to my face, right? And on the other end, people be like, this is amazing. What you're doing is so important. And it's the most polarizing kind of space and so
I think it's fair to say that not all non-alcoholic beverages are equal in terms of their tastiness and their quality, and Pat will be the first one to admit that. But we learned some interesting stuff about why certain drinks are more successful than others, just from a basic science perspective.
So Pat was very good explaining why there's actually a reason why gin tastes horrible. I should say fake gin tastes horrible. But something like fake beer actually tastes almost like the real thing.
Well, to be fair, he didn't say horrible, but he did.
That was my words for sure.
He was explaining why certain categories of drinks are more successful than others for the discerning palate.
There's sort of beer, wine, spirits, there's ready-to-drink cocktails. But if you look at each one of them, they've kind of followed this trajectory of beer was first. It's the easiest to do.
Yeah.
95% of it is not alcohol, so you can kind of take it out. I mean, it's probably been 30, 40 years they've been working on beer. It's gotten pretty darn good. It can fool you in a lot of ways. And there's about a dozen different techniques to create dealcoholized or non-alcoholic beer. So you've got that trajectory. And then wine is actually on a similar trajectory. It's much further behind, but similar. Wine has maybe 10, 12, 15% alcohol. So it's a little harder. Yeah. And so that's the same thing for spirits. I think all of them are going to kind of going to that point. Yeah,
I'm going to have to check back on my non-alcoholic gin in 10 years. But I did find something I liked.
Yeah. I think it smells pretty.
Yes, I did firsthand witness you discover a new love in the non-alcoholic beverage world. I think on TikTok they call it the sleepy girl mocktail.
Yeah, I always like to have a drink to relax me and help me sleep. And I love this thing called a nightcap. I actually like this.
Yeah.
I like this.
They're adding a bunch of functional things like turmeric, ashwagandha, valerian, licorice root.
That's in my sleepy tea.
Yeah. You probably like. Well, you could make your tea and put a shot of that in there and have me
melatonin.
Yeah, it's got.
A cup. I actually bought a bottle.
Yeah.
And actually the other night I made like almost my version of a hot toddy.
My favorite that we tried was a sparkling red wine type thing from a brand called Muri.
These guys are like mad scientists in the food world in Copenhagen. So this is like their reddish wine comparison.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And again,
look at that color.
The second you smell it, the second you taste it, you're going to be like, it's not red wine. It's got a little hint of
this is different.
Yeah. So it's
A lot of layers.
Right.
Okay, do you want to hear my takeaway, Shirley, from our whole Dre experience?
Sure.
I think the best drinks in the store are the ones that aren't trying to be something else. We were both kind of, I'll admit I was also, even though I tried to be a good sport, I was kind of grossed out by the non-alcoholic whiskey that we tried. And even the non-alcoholic Cabernet was kind of weird. But these original drinks, like your nightcap drink and that sparkling red wine thing we tried, they were complex, they were dry. It really did feel like an adult beverage, and it really hit the spot for me.
It's a real new category of drinking. Pat was saying that 80% of the customers that come into Dre, they continue to drink. They're not sober.
It seems like there's not just one motivation for drinking less. There's just a lot of things coming together for people to make that personal decision to just essentially cut down.
This health question really looms large now. I mean, there are all these studies coming out saying that no amount of alcohol is healthy. It might even cause cancer. So we wanted to learn more about the science about drinking alcohol and what it does to our bodies. And I feel like I've gotten a lot of mixed messages in my adult life. It's really, really confusing. So we went to see Scott Hadland. He's a doctor specializing in addiction at Mass General for Children. He says young people are drinking less, and I wanted to know why. And I first asked him if he himself was on the wagon this January.
Personally, I do actually sort of cut down on my alcohol consumption during the month of January, although I will say I kind of tend to do it throughout the year. I think there has been enough new awareness around alcohol and the potential harms of it that, as a clinician, especially as a clinician who takes care of young people of a variety of ages, including college students, for example, who drink alcohol, it's really important for me to be aware of these health harms and to sort of take that into account when I make my own decisions about alcohol consumption.
Yeah, I'm interested in Damp January because I don't know. It's almost like I've been drinking less for several years now. I'm not addicted to alcohol, but I've cut back for health reasons, maybe as I've gotten older. I'm in my early 50s, and my crew, I guess, all of us were drinking less because we just don't like how alcohol feels. All of which has made me re-examine my relationship to alcohol. It's not about achieving sobriety. Maybe I'm too emotionally attached or socially attached to drinking? Are other people asking themselves these same questions as well?
Absolutely. I think people of all different ages are asking themselves this question. The group that I work with most closely in my own clinical work is adolescents and young adults, really up to about the age of 25 or even 30. And what I'm seeing in younger people is a complete reevaluation of their relationship to alcohol. We tend to think historically of young people as being some of the people that drink the most. And that still is the case when you look at different numbers for different age groups, that young people do drink, but those numbers are going down. And in fact, we're at a point right now where kind of fewer people, young people than ever, are drinking alcohol. So it's clear there's this big reevaluation going on.
Why are young people drinking less now? That used to be when I was growing up, and I know about you growing up, and you're a little bit younger than me. That's what everybody wanted to do. They couldn't wait to start drinking, right? And often they started drinking much younger than they're supposed to.
I think there's a few things afoot. One thing that I see is, for better or for worse, there actually is a shift away from alcohol and towards cannabis. That has been something certainly that we're seeing locally and that I'm hearing about from my colleagues who are working nationally. So I think that is a piece of it. And that's a whole other conversation is, what are the potential health risks of using cannabis, especially if you're using it heavily. But I do think there's a larger shift afoot in people of all ages because of a couple of things. One is that whereas we used to talk about alcohol as this thing that, was somewhat healthy even in moderation, right? The idea that if you had a glass of red wine with dinner every night, that would make it so that you lived longer. Our understanding of the research base now has really evolved, and it's kind of clear that there's probably no truly healthy level of alcohol consumption. Now, don't get me wrong, a drink here or there is not going to cause enormous harm, but there's an appreciation that any bit of alcohol brings with it some level of harm.
As long as I can remember, there have been these studies that push this idea that, drinking can be healthy, especially this one red wine, a day, right? One glass of red wine a day. I know people who don't even like to drink, and they started drinking red wine for health reasons. Was that all the alcohol industry? Were they funding these studies? Because now it seems like we've gone the complete opposite. Some doctors will probably say no amount of drinking is healthy now.
Yeah, this is an area of enormous evolution right now, and has been an evolution that's been afoot for at least a decade, if not longer. Here in the United States, we have for a long time said that alcohol consumption really only became a problem when people exceeded certain drink cutoffs per week. So, for example, if a woman exceeded 8 drinks per week, or if a man exceeded 15 drinks per week, then that was considered heavy drinking, and that was associated with harm. If you look to other countries like Canada, for example, their current risky drinking guidelines sort of say that you really shouldn't exceed 3 or more drinks per week. And that's a newer recognition of the fact that any level of drinking probably brings with it some harm. The World Health Organization says exactly that all drinking brings with it some level of harm. There's no amount of alcohol that is without harm. And this has been kind of a recent evolution. I think the studies that had been done in the past were, the research that we had available. And so we were making the best recommendation that we could at the time. And that led people to conclude that maybe a little bit of alcohol was healthy. You would see this across studies, that people who drank small amounts actually tended to live longer and have fewer health problems. There were problems with those studies that we could get into that we've now recognized. And so our reevaluation of those studies and the newer studies that have come out have shifted the field towards this new way of thinking about alcohol and harm. And this is what science is supposed to do. It's supposed to continually reevaluate itself and make new recommendations as new data come out.
So, Scott, can you explain why it's only now that doctors are warning us about the link between alcohol and cancer? It seems like we do so much research on cancer, and why is this only coming up now?
Well, to be fair, these studies that really highlight this link between alcohol and cancer actually have been around for a long time, and they've kind of gone under the radar. I think complicated by this idea that maybe a little bit of alcohol was actually healthy and health promoting, actually kind of caused people to not really look at this quite large body of studies that showed this link between cancer and alcohol consumption. And so the reason that we're talking about this now is because the Surgeon General has released this report that has everybody discussing this at long last. And so what the Surgeon General's report shows is that alcohol has been linked across a range of studies to 7 different types of cancer. So, for example, liver cancer, which is not a surprise because we know alcohol damages the liver, but then also a lot of head and neck cancers where, again, alcohol is sort of being exposed directly to those tissues. And alcohol is a toxin. And when alcohol is broken down in the body, it also forms additional toxins. And these toxins are likely the carcinogens that are causing these cancers.
I mean, I'm really glad that many of us are reevaluating our relationship to alcohol. A few years ago, I spent a lot of time writing about mass and casts. There used to be a lot of tents in Boston, and much has been made about the drug abuse and drug addiction and drug dealing there, from opioids to fentanyl. But when I was walking those streets with people who were homeless and living on the streets, a lot of them were addicted to alcohol. That's why they were there, not because they were shooting up something, but because of a untreated addiction to alcohol. That's what kept them on the streets. And that's not what I expected to hear. And I don't know if that's what you see in your own work.
Yeah, I think it's a reminder that alcohol can cause enormous problems for people, right? I think I never want to kind of pit one substance against another, but it is worth noting that overdoses, drug overdoses kill on the average about 100,000 Americans per year. And that number may have recently stabilized, but generally has been climbing. Even amid that, in the most recent year for which we have data, alcohol actually killed 180,000 Americans per year, killed more Americans per year. And the reason that we don't talk about that as much is that a drug overdose death is enormously sudden and tragic and devastating. Alcohol kills people in a much slower way, right? It causes
slower and silently.
That's right, exactly. So it's causing, liver problems that develop over time, may evolve into liver cancer. A lot of these cancers that we've been talking about, head and neck cancers, evolve very slowly over time. Even the heart disease that's associated with alcohol builds over time. And so there isn't this sudden moment the way that there is for other substances. This actually really kind of builds over time. And that's why we, I think, don't talk nearly enough, as we should, about the nearly 200,000 Americans who die every year.
So in terms of talking to your patients or schools talking to kids about alcohol, I mean, how has the messaging changed now? I mean, it used to be, just say no, but what is it now?
Yeah, we've really progressed a lot in terms of our alcohol and drug prevention in schools and kind of what we're doing in clinics and elsewhere in the community. And we have really moved away from this sort of abstinence-only approach, this almost sort of moralistic approach of like, don't do it, and instead have moved into a space of, we really recommend that you don't, and here's why, sort of really working hard to equip young people with an understanding of why they might make a choice not to use, and also giving them skills to be able to navigate social situations in which they're being offered a substance, sort of the ability for them to actually refuse the substance in that moment. And that actually has created a dent in the rates at which young people use substances. If you look at the most recent data that were just released last month in December 2024, we actually are now at historically low levels of teen substance use. And I think that has gone very unappreciated, is that for the first time in decades, we're really at the lowest levels that we have ever seen in terms of teens using substances. And more teens than ever before are using no substances at all.
Why is changing the messaging from just say no to here's a choice? Why is that become more effective?
It's more empowering for young people. Young people want to be in control of their decisions. And in fact, some of that messaging of just say no has been shown in some of the studies that have been done looking back to actually have caused some teenagers to become more curious about drugs.
Also
to actually
rebel.
Exactly. To go out of their way to actually find them because they actually were intrigued by what all of this was about. And so taking this approach of empowering a young person to say look, the decision is yours, but here's what you need to know before you make that decision. And here's how you might go about implementing that decision by having the knowledge and skills. That actually seems to be much more powerful.
So January is over. damp, dry, whatever you want to call it. So what do you recommend now? Should I go damp? Keep going damp? Should I go dry? I mean, what should we take away from this experience?
Well, I think everybody needs to evaluate for themselves, right? This is so personalized and so individualized as to what's going to work best for people. I think some people will look back at their dry or damp January and say, hey, I slept better, my skin looks better, I lost a little bit of weight. My doctor tells me my blood pressure is better. Like those are lessons there. And for many people that might be motivating, and they might say, you know what, I am going to drink less moving forward. And continually reevaluate each January that comes by. And I think that's great. Other people might say, this was a great temporary experiment. I now understand my relationship to alcohol better. But you know what? Whereas I was dry in January, I really like having that glass of red wine with dinner on Saturday night, and I'm going to keep that going. And so people need to decide for themselves what is right. And it's important to remember that even as we've been talking about the Surgeon General's report and the links between alcohol and cancer, like, let's be clear, these are public health studies that show a slightly increased risk that for the entire population's health across America, it's very important that we have this messaging and that we talk about the harms of alcohol. But on an individual level, if you have 2 drinks a week instead of 1 drink a week, or 3 drinks a week instead of 2 drinks a week, your risk of these cancers and other, health-related risks from alcohol are not going to be sky high. They're going to be sort of really kind of marginal.
Well, Scott, thanks for having me here. This has been a great conversation, very illuminating. I can't wait to tell my kids that if they don't drink, they'll be part of a growing trend, right? And maybe that's what will happen. Maybe they'll wait till they're 21. So Scott Hadland is a doctor specializing in addiction at Mass General for Children. Scott, I would raise a glass, but can I say cheers? Is that okay to say?
Absolutely, yeah.
Raise a glass of water, right?
Thank you for having me. Let's go grab a mocktail sometime.
All right, that sounds great. Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Uzair Ahmed. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.